am hoping everybody's good. I am trying to set up all the different streaming software, which hopefully is working. We will find out. So good to be with you guys today. It's February 21st, 2024. My name is Kim and Curtin, and I'm the Wall Street coach, and I'm hoping to be a contribution to those who come to this conversation. It's usually all traders, but anybody that is in need of some support, feel free to ask your question. Basically, I come to these almost every Wednesday at about 8 o'clock Eastern, in the neighborhood of that time, and take questions that you guys put in the chat box and coach. I kind of coach based on what shows up in the chat box. And I also kind of come in with a topic or two to hopefully prompt everybody to start thinking in a direction that will facilitate them becoming more self-aware, more conscious, more successful as a trader. And at the end of the day, in all things, the more self-aware you are, the more in tune you are to the places where you potentially have some shadows, the better your life turns out to be. I have found just in my own journey of personal development that it's the places that I have not looked, or the shadows that I don't want to face, that I'll always pay a cost for. I'm so glad you're here, teletrader. Good to have you here. So at the end of the day, what I'm an advocate of, guys, is self-awareness. But the only way we become more self-aware is to practice non-judgment and to practice as much neutrality as possible. Part of what I've noticed is that it's really hard for people to take a look at themselves if they're coming from judgment, if they're coming from a place of making themselves wrong, if they're coming from a place of, not being curious. Like, curiosity and neutrality are the two things I always ask every client to bring to these conversations when they coach with me one-on-one, when they're in a group, or when they're here. Hi, BTO. So glad you're here. So I invite anybody who's watching this, listening today, to try to practice for yourself more curiosity, more neutrality, because it will only serve you, especially when you want to take a look at the places that you might have that are sabotaging yourself. Nobody sabotages themselves on purpose. Hello, Tina. Glad you're here. Hi, Shane. I'm glad you're here too. Nobody sabotages themselves on purpose. But what happens is we have ways of being that perhaps we just haven't questioned. Look, I have yet to meet one person who had like a perfect childhood. I have yet to meet one person who feels they got everything that they needed from their parents or caretakers. So at the end of the day, there's going to be some places where all of us, feel perhaps that there are some holes in the puzzle that we are. If you've ever put together like a 300, 600, or 1,000 piece puzzle, the biggest fear I have when I've ever put those puzzles together is I'm going to get to the finish of the puzzle and find out if a couple of pieces missing. That's always my concern. And that could be the way you guys feel sometimes. Like, dang, I'm just missing a couple of pieces to the puzzle that I am. And so I want you guys to, first of all, know that's the case for all of us. We all have that tendency to feel like, wow, there might be a couple of pieces of my puzzle that I'm short. I'm short a couple of pieces. And so, of course, if there's any of this belief going on with you guys to begin with, you can only imagine how going into trading exasperates that, right? It's going to constantly put a huge spotlight upon your ways of operating. So if anybody does have any trading questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. But I have some questions with me that I want to ask you guys, and you may or may not feel comfortable answering them in the chat box. Of course, those who are, I would love to see your answers. And those who aren't, no sweat. You can journal to yourself. But here are some of these questions, and I want you guys to be as honest with yourself as possible while bringing lots of empathy, compassion, curiosity, and neutrality. The key here is, how do you look at yourself? How do you take a hard look at yourself? Honest look at yourself without the judgment. I bet you that's hard for most of you guys to do. It can still be hard for me. I'm, been practicing it for a couple of decades, so it gets easier over time, but I can easily slip into self-judgment, even though I know it's so destructive and it doesn't serve me in the long run. Because as soon as you start to judge yourself, you go into a contraction. You start to go into resistance. And when you're resistant, when you're contracted, when everything tightens up, when your arms go across your chest, you know damn well you're not open to change. You're not open to being able to see. First of all, it's almost like you hold your breath, right? How far could you go as an athlete if you're holding your breath? Not that far. But that's what happens when we start to judge ourselves. So here are some questions. I hope you guys have some pen and paper ready to go. And again, if you feel comfortable in the chat box giving me your answers, and everybody else that watches this, that would be terrific. So this is just you guys taking a look within, okay? So here is the first question. When I'm annoyed, I have a tendency to blank. I want you to fill in the blank. So say this to yourself. Think about this for yourself. When I'm annoyed, I have a tendency to fill in the blank. Anybody want to share what they are aware of about themselves when they are annoyed? Very curious. And again, maybe nobody wants to share, and that's okay too. But that is the question. And even, okay, good, Tina. Good job seeing that. So Tina's sharing that hers to walk away and to avoidance. So good job for you to see that. Eric, hi, Eric, glad you're here. Ignore it. Good answer. Shane says, I have less patience. Good. So I want you guys to hold on to these questions, and I want you to see whatever the statements are, that those answers are indicators to you of places where you might be self-sabotaging, where you might be holding yourself back. And here's the other homework I'm going to give to you all. And remember, guys, with my homework, you can do one of three things. You can agree to take the homework on, you can disagree and counter offer, or you can just say, the hell with you, Cam, and this damn homework. I don't want to do any of it. All right, BTO says, I have a tendency to shame myself. You guys have fantastic clarity about what goes on. So what I'm going to request is that whatever you guys notice about yourself as you step into the week before we come back again next Wednesday, what I would like everybody to do is, when you guys, for example, that's okay, Eric, take your time. There's no rush. The homework takes as long as the homework takes. And all that matters is that you're engaging in the work. So good job, you, that you've taken it on so seriously. Well done. So that when I'm annoyed, I have a tendency to blank. Here's my suggestion, guys. I want everybody to notice the next time you get annoyed and interrupt the pattern, interrupt the default setting of ignore it, have less patience, blame yourself, walk away, right? Whatever you guys each individually wrote, what I want you to do is to notice, first of all, oh, look at that. I'm annoyed. I'm going to my default setting, but I'm going to interrupt that pattern and do something different. Now, it doesn't have to be dramatic, guys, but I want you to mix it up. I want you to find a way to notice, first of all, and then respond in a different way. In small ways, this can be done. But what this is about is we're wanting to get very curious about how that is a knee-jerk response, right? For each of us, we have sort of these default settings or knee-jerk responses that ultimately, at one point in our life, they kept us safe. But they don't necessarily keep us safe now. They potentially cost us. And that is ultimately what we're looking at. So BTO says, I see myself struggling with combating that emotion. So the emotion of being annoyed, BTO, is that what you're saying? You're saying that, when you're annoyed, you have a tendency. Is it just hard for you to feel the feeling of being annoyed? I'm not sure I understand PTO, so just clarify that for me. And Eric, I hear you saying change the channel, like kind of take yourself out of that experience. Yeah, so here's the thing. I want to recommend the emotion of shaming myself and changing that. Got it. Okay, so PTO, the shaming of yourself is your gremlin. So that you have to see, first of all, isn't you doing it? It's an old, likely very old gremlin that is operating and coming from a place of having you be made wrong because of X, Y, and Z. So what I would like you to do is specifically keep an eye out for that inner gremlin and the frequency in which you are shamed. And that would be really, potentially rereading Taming Your Gremlin, rediscovering what gremlins, or one gremlin's probably more than one, has an experience, the voice of making you wrong, shaming yourself. I would really like you to spend some time specifically on that gremlin, because that shaming yourself is also just a default setting, and it is probably just baked in at this point. So I want you to notice how frequent it happens. And that could be just an index card where you take notice all the times it occurs. All right, so Eric is saying annoyance comes from frustration. So here's the thing, Eric, I don't want you to intellectualize the why you're doing this, because the why is sort of irrelevant. I want you to stay out of the intellectualizing this and get the focus simply on that they change the channel, right? When you're annoyed. I want you to stay in the experience. A lot of times what we will do to protect ourselves is when we notice ourselves doing something that potentially is costly to ourselves, or compromises ourselves, we start to go into our head. We go into our thinking and we start to think it through, because that allows us to escape the emotion. That allows us to kind of leapfrog over what emotions are coming up from us. But that is not what's usually needed at that moment. We don't need to understand the why. We need to be with the what. We need to be in the heart of what we feel, the discomfort in our belly, the discomfort of maybe our heart feeling sad. Eric, I get that it's difficult for you to get out of your head, but you've got to realize that going into your head also protected you at some point. For all of us, being in our head is an escape from being in our body, being in our feelings. So I would say the homework for you, Eric, is to practice going back into your body. Every time you notice you're in your intellect, pause. It's so easy to distract and deflect when we're up here. So the key is noticing, oh, there I am again, trying to figure it out, intellectualize, think about it, come up with a solution. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to feel. And that's when I want you to take that metaphoric elevator from your head down into your body. I want you to try to interrupt your habit to go to your head and instead notice it, pause, and take the elevator down into your body. You want to be a feeler of your feelings. Now, for some of us, being a feeler of our feelings can feel incredibly vulnerable. It can feel incredibly uncomfortable because it was potentially a dangerous experience when we were kids. I know for myself, I couldn't afford to feel the feelings I was having because the environment I was in. I had to quickly learn how to cut myself off from my feelings, how to cut myself off from my needs, and spend my time up in my head as opposed to in my heart, in my body, in my feelings, in my needs, because they weren't going to get addressed. So we cut ourselves off from them, guys. We numb ourselves to them. Why? Because we want to stay safe. And when we're kids, the way we stay safe usually is to adapt to the needs of our caretakers as opposed to our own. Because if we get the memo early that they're not going to pay attention to them, we figure, well, what good is having all these unmet needs? That's not a good feeling. So what if I just cut myself off from them? That's the key. You guys want to notice how often you're potentially cutting yourself off from your feelings because that once served you, but it doesn't serve you now. It probably costs you a lot. All right, so Tilly Trader says, I have less patience too. Good to know. So this is the thing. All I want you guys to do with these handful of questions or statements that I'm going to give you today, I want you to write them down because I want you to be with them beyond just today. I want you to notice now, oh, Tilly Trader says, when I'm annoyed, I have a tendency to have less patience. Isn't that fascinating? I want everybody to use that phrase as you watch yourself through the course of the week. I want you to notice, oh, I was annoyed and I feel a lot less patience with the person driving down the street, or perhaps the grocery clerk who's going too slow at the register. Like, I just want everybody to notice, wow, I'm annoyed. And in the midst of that annoyance, I have the tendency to, and I want you to just simply notice it. And if you're feeling energized enough to go to the next level, I want you to try to take a different behavior as opposed to the one that comes to you by default. All right, we're going to go on to the next one. When I'm tired, I blank. When I'm tired, I blank. Anybody want to fill that in? I'll tell you one of mine. Sometimes when I'm tired, I get grumpy. Sometimes when I'm tired, I will have, I will want salt. I don't know what. I'll just like want a chip or pretzel or something with salt, peanut, salty peanut. When I get tired, sometimes I start to want to have some kind of a salty snack. So what are yours, guys? When I'm tired, I blank. When I'm tired, I make mistakes. Okay, so that's a good one for you to see because it is something that you possibly know about yourself and you possibly, Tilly Trader, are, I'm curious, the frequency of you being tired. And other thing too that I want you guys to keep an ear out is all of these catchphrases are potentially catchphrases that are applicable to your trading, right? Because And while I'm just wanting to ask these questions in the most kind of neutral way for everybody here, the reason I want you guys to write these questions down are because I want you to come from a lot of curiosity the next time you do your trading with regards to what happens to you in your trading when you are annoyed, when you are tired, and the other things I'll read. BTO says, when I'm tired, I tend to not think before acting or even participating in the market. Good answer. Tina, when I'm tired, I don't want to do anything. It definitely slows me down. Good to know, Tina. Good to know, BTO. These are the keys, guys. I want you to just start to notice that there are particular ways you respond to being annoyed, to being tired. And what you want to ask yourself is, oh, if that is right now my default setting, what potentially do you get if you start to interrupt the pattern? At the end of the day, what you guys want to think about is that each of these statements are possibly currently invisibly informing you. And what I want you to start to really think about is how and where are these statements uh, going to cost you? Obviously in your trading, but potentially in other areas as well. So that's what I want you guys to think of. Okay, let me keep going here. When I feel hurt, I blank. When I feel hurt, I blank. Just put it in the comments if you guys are able to. And I want you to think too about all the different variables on what being hurt means, right? You could be hurt that the trade you thought was going to go a certain way didn't go that way. You could be hurt because your friend, your colleague nailed to trade and you didn't. You could be hurt because you called somebody and they didn't call you back. But how is that showing up in your trading? So I want you guys to just think about when you feel hurt, how is that affecting you in general for your life? In general, when you get hurt, how do you have a tendency to respond or react? And then I want you to think about when you feel hurt when you're trading. All right, Tilly Trader says, when I feel hurt, I feel like a balloon with the air letting out. That is such a great descriptive of what happens for you. BTO says, I feel hate and shaming, and I try to overcome by going back to the market. Wow, PTO, thank you for sharing that too. So these are, two experiences, but I have a feeling other people can relate to them too. So what you want to see is that there is a physical and emotional response that's happening to you guys when you feel hurt. And what I want to, again, emphasize is that anytime you are not coming from a place of neutral strategy, you are going to be potentially in jeopardy because your motives aren't clean. Your motives are influenced by whatever this mental state of mind, emotional state of mind is. And so ultimately what I'm going to suggest for you, Tilly, is that when you feel hurt, you take that metaphoric elevator down into your body and let yourself serve what that feels like inside, the air kind of being let out of a balloon. See if you can concentrate on where that happens in your body. See if you can ride the wave of that all the way through. And that could be difficult at first. It could feel uncomfortable. It could feel scary. It could feel, like you're not doing it right. But I really want to emphasize you consider surfing that feeling as opposed to stuffing it down or pushing it out of the way. And BTO, what I'm going to suggest here is that that feeling of hurt is possibly coming from a place of, something's wrong, right? If hate comes up, ultimately what that is indicating to us is that we're coming from a place of wanting to protect ourselves. We're coming from a place of having to, keep ourselves safe. So what I want you to think about is that you want to start to have a little bit more empathy, a little bit more kind of self-support in the middle of when that hurt shows up. And I also would like to recommend you also surf through that feeling of whatever is coming up for you, be it the shame, be it the anger and the hurt. What I am definitely going to recommend, PTO, is that you don't go back to the market, because you can never make up for a loss, right? And if that sense of feeling hurt by the market is what's afoot in that moment, then going back to the market is the last place you should be, because ultimately, I'm the biggest advocate of every time you guys have a loss, you have to accept it with a period at the end of that statement. You are never making that money back, because what happens is people will get into a cycle of thinking, oh, I can just go get it back. No, you can't. You have to accept every loss that it's a loss with a period, not a comma. And that begins to just shift how you approach loss. If loss is hard for you, if it triggers stuff for you, that means you have some work to do around loss. It's not an invitation for you to go and avoid the feeling by just trading again. All right, Tina, when I feel hurt, I do nothing in the market. Then it's when I sit and watch the place go by. So Tina, that is really fascinating. I think it probably would also serve you to surf that hurt, to feel that hurt, because when we don't let ourselves feel the hurt, there is definitely going to be a backlog of that hurt over many years, over time. And at the end of the day, that hurt does different things to different people. But it sounds to me, Tina, like what it does is it paralyzes you. It shuts you down, and it has you kind of go into a sense of paralysis. And what I want to suggest to you is that letting yourself feel the hurt, allowing yourself to sit in the discomfort, in the pain, that even though initially it might be uncomfortable, even though initially it might be painful, it will facilitate you being able to move through it and out to the other side. There's a great quote from Winston Churchill, which I know you guys have heard, and it says, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going. And what does that mean? It means that if you are in the process of having something that's really hard to be with, don't stop. Keep moving, keep going, because that is part of what each of us have to go through to come out on the other side of it. So I really hope the conversation, I've had this conversation here before about surfing your emotions. I call it emotional non-resistance. I've also will mention a couple of books here that I really strongly recommend. One of them is called The One Thing Holding You Back. That's by Ravi Kushner. He has a lot of books, and I recommend all of them because his work is all about truly learning how to be with what those hard to be with things are. So his other book is called Setting Your Heart on Fire. And what is his other book that I wanted to recommend to you guys? The One Thing Holding You Back, Setting Your Heart on Fire. And what's the other one? The other one is escaping me right now. And the other book that I want to recommend is a book called Waking the Tiger, and that's by Peter Levine. These books are in service to somatic work, which is taking the elevator down from your head into your body and feeling and allowing yourself to process. And that is what all of you would be served by. You coming out of your head, you can't think your way, guys, out of your feelings. You have to feel your way out of your feelings. And if you notice and you have a tendency to constantly go into doing, constantly go into intellect, even if it's just during this conversation each week, I invite you to not do that. It is often a form of busy work to stay busy because we don't want to feel. It is often a sign of our avoiding something that we're feeling by constantly thinking about it and or even commenting about it and or talking about it. All of that is often used to distract and deflect from us being with or feeling discomfort in the space of being. And that is ultimately what I want to get you guys more tolerant of, more comfortable with. All right, here's another one. You guys ready? Around money, I can be a bit difficult because, fill in that blank. I'm going to say it one more time. Around money, I can be a bit difficult because. I want you to fill in the blank. All right, let's see what everybody's got. There's got to be a lot of good ones here when it comes to money. Remember, these are statements that are specific to what your experience is. And I want you guys to look at these also from the place of what happens when you ask yourself these questions in the midst also of your trading. Okay. Money is hard to get, and only the ones that have it deserve it. BTO, that's an interesting question. A statement, an interesting blank. So around money, I can be a bit difficult because, and your answer is money is hard to get and only the ones that have it deserve it. So much, so many stories in that statement, BTO. And what I want to say to you is there are so many people who have money that never earned it and just inherited it. So did they deserve it just because they inherited it? So I want you to look at that statement and see if you can't find the holes. Money, I would say, is not hard to get, right? If you look at like somebody maybe who wins the lottery, for them it wasn't hard to get. So look at these statements, guys, no matter what statements come up for you, I want you to look at them and start to answer them. They don't always blow it, Eric. Some lottery winners keep it. Actually, some lottery winners actually do quite well. Tina says, around money, I can be difficult because it is tight and magnified by the current economy. That is really a powerful statement, Tina. I want you to get very curious about that statement too and ask yourself, is that true? Eric, you had said around money can be difficult because scarcity creeps in when things snowball. So again, I want you to question these beliefs. BTO, wow, you just made me chuckle and question those beliefs. Thank you. Good. I'm so glad. That's what I'm here for. I want everybody to see the stories that you guys have. Like you guys have these rich tapestry of stories that you are so committed to. And what I want you guys to start to look at is they are all made up. They are all made up. You made them up, or your mother made them up, or your father made them up, or your uncle made them up, or your next door neighbor that you didn't even like made it up and you heard it at 8 years old and you bought it hook, line, and sinker. And what I want you guys to realize is that all of you have a whole bunch of stories that may or may not actually be the truth. They are just a small window into what you have completely, without question, possibly lived for a really long time. That to even consider that these are stories that don't actually serve you, nor are they accurate, could kind of feel a little bit like heresy. Like, how dare you take that belief away from me? So again, why are we doing this? We want you guys to ultimately start to look at the places that you are being driven invisibly, right? All of us are being driven by unconscious beliefs, unconscious stories, unconscious fears. The key is to start to bring what's in the unconscious, what's in the dark, to the light. We want to bring them all up and put them on the table. And that is ultimately what I want all of you guys to start to practice. Start looking for what these statements are and get curious about them. All right. So we just did the money one. Here's another one. I guess I worry quite a lot about blank. I guess I worry quite a lot about blank. What is the fill in the blank for everybody here? Feel free to share. And remember, just as a service announcement, in the meantime, whoever's here and wants specific coaching, just put it in the chat box, guys. I always come with a topic to talk about in case people don't have something they want coaching on. So I want you guys to always feel free to put those questions in the chat box, whatever you want coaching on or want to have addressed. Or if you even want to celebrate a win. I think part of the challenge and why I have that trader vent line is for people to discharge what they're struggling with and a place to brag and a place to speak a win that they feel like maybe they can't have with other people. All right, so Tilly Trader says, I guess I worry quite a lot about being able to get consistent as a trader, or am I just wasting time and resources? Like, do I have what it takes? Yep. It's great that you see that, Tilly Trader, and I want you to let yourself just sit and be with that worry, because that worry undoubtedly is a foot in the middle of your trading, right? If you're coming from a worry that perhaps you won't get consistent or that you're wasting resources, all of that is going to have a lot of an impact on that pressure you potentially feel to take trades that perhaps you really don't want to take. I want you to really look and take a look at like, oh, this statement is in me. This statement is kind of potentially driving my vehicle. And the key here is to not make any of them wrong, but to just get very curious. All right. And then Tina is saying, I worry a lot about money. So that's really good that you've said it and that you see it, Tina. And what I want you to do is just to start to get curious about how come, like, what is that about? Like, isn't that fascinating? That's the phrase I want to introduce to all of you. When you notice something about yourself, that will help you step into curiosity. Isn't that fascinating is the phrase I want you to use, because I want you to start to get curious. And the way we get curious is to not be in judgment about it. All right, James said, I worry that I'll have to go back to working a 9 to 5. I think about it every day, even though I haven't been even though I have been a full-time trader for 2 years. So that's a fascinating, worry, James. And I would invite you to also think about what might be afoot with that, right? That sounds to me like there could be a couple of stories and beliefs underneath. So, I would say it's possibly a gremlin. I don't know if you've been here before, James, but a book that I strongly recommend and frequently speak to is a book called Taming Your Gremlin. It's by Rick Carson. I actually did a podcast interview with the author of this book, which is a great conversation because he speaks at length about how easy it is for all of us to get trapped in these gremlin stories. So, James, I would say perhaps that book will open up for you a different approach as opposed to being in that worry all the time. Again, all of these statements are things that we hope, I hope will help you see yourself more clearly, will help you see that there is some invisible drivers underneath it. Okay, good. James, I I have read it and I went to Landmark upon your recommendation. James, we never talked about how Landmark was. I am so glad that you did that, and I'm curious. But remember, even if you read the Taming the Gremlin book, one can always reread it because one wants to practice the constant kind of reflection of what that gremlin is saying today. Because they don't really go away, guys. They just kind of, stop being perhaps as powerful. But James, I'm kind of curious how you found Landmark, by the way. And what is Landmark, guys? It's a 3.5-day intensive weekend that for me set me on the path to become a coach. It was game changing, life changing. And I believe, James, I believe that I wanted that to happen for you. And that's why I recommended you go to it. So I'm so glad you went. Yeah, but you just want to practice, right? Keeping an eye out always for those gremlins. All right, Tina went back to work part-time to try and combat the money concerns. Tina, good job. I think that's fantastic. And I still want you to get very curious about what and where this fear comes from. Remember, we talked a couple of weeks ago about Jared Dillion's book, which is called No Worries, which talks about those who are coming potentially from, a cheap F sort of mindset around money, and or those who are high rollers, right? They are two sides of the same coin. So at the end of the day, I want you guys to really do your due diligence about what your relationship to money is. I want you guys to really start to get curious about what your concepts of scarcity and abundance are, and to just start to really look deep around what is that relationship with money like? What are the beliefs you grew up with? What are the beliefs you have now? What is going on for you with regards to your money? Because at the end of the day, that is one of the biggest invisible drivers than anything else out there. Much, much more powerful than most of us realize. And it's because it is tied, money is always going to be tied to our survival, to our sense of safety. And I think what we have to realize is that if we don't take a hard look at what our temperature set is with regards to money, it's going to cost us all. Oh my God, so many books, BTO, on money. I'm just going to try to remember, a handful right now. The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. How to Make One Hell of a Profit and Still Go to Heaven by DeMartini. The Instant Millionaire by Fisher. T. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Barbara Wilder's book, Money is Love. Money, what is that one called? It's a new one that I wanted to add to the list. I forgot about it. I just found it on my bookshelf. And I was like, oh, right, Marie Nemeth. I think she has a couple, but one of them I think is called The Energy of Money. Yeah, so there's just a handful. Rich Dad Poor Dad, that's an old classic. Um, there are so many books on money. That gives you guys a good start. I would definitely consider my book, Transforming Wall Street, because there's a lot of people in that book. Some of them are very famous Wall Streeters who talk about their own relationship to money. So, what I want you guys to always do is just think about, like, what was the relationship your parents had to money, especially if you are coming from a working class background, or your parents were, or their parents were. We all have a different kind of cultural expectations around money, the neighborhoods we grow up in, the kids we hang out with, the potential places of worship, and the expectations around, um, you know, how much you should give to charity. Like, all of these are places and like threads that coordinate how we interpret money, what and how scarcity we are coming from, how much of from a place of abundance are we coming from. And as Jared, and also Jared Dillion's book, the No Worries book, because he does pose really great questions to everybody in that book to identify, do you see yourself more as being super cheap or coming from a high roller kind of mindset, and that neither of them are healthy. Ultimately, what he speaks to about that title, No Worries, is that he's advocating all of us want to get to a place where money isn't driving our decisions, where money isn't driving the choices we make, but that we are in a place of neutrality and not consumed or obsessed with money. And I can tell you, having grown up into very different environments, I mean, on one hand, I qualified for free lunch at school because my mom was living, basically in poverty. And I also was having weekends every other weekend with my dad, who had a very different lifestyle. So I was constantly experiencing unbelievable great wealth and then poverty. I was going shuffling between two extremes, meeting, the owner of the Stutz Bearcat, which is like one of the most expensive cars in the world, to driving in a Stutz Bearcat on occasion. Like, and then, watching my mother put $5 of gas in the gas tank. So what I want you guys to really see is that both of those extremes informed me, and whatever your extremes were, or the environment you were in, informed you. And again, they may or may not be with information that's truthful. All right, so James says, how does one deal with coming from a place of scarcity that was present during childhood? So that's such a great question. We have to heal, James. We have to heal from what that scarcity was. And the first step, obviously, is identifying where that scarcity was, how it triggered us. We were homeless for years. Like, I experienced homelessness. I watched my family get evicted from one of the places we had because it wasn't properly insulated. So we had these exorbitant heating bills every month. My mother took the landlords to court. They were just such bad guys, totally corrupt, kind of slum landlords, if you will. And she won. But then a couple of things happened due to connections in this small little tiny village. And the judge reversed this decision and evicted us. And that is one of the biggest traumas of my life. I wasn't actually there when it happened. The landlords broke into the basement and then threw everything on the front lawn. And my mother and sister were there, and I was down at the court trying to get a stay of the eviction. So that, James, is like one of a big trauma that I have had to do so much work around, because I have so much shame from that incident, from all of the costs that we paid that day. And I think the key is to be able to write these stories down, right? Everybody has their collection of stories. Everybody has their moments. The other story, which I think I've shared with you guys already, is kind of like this twisted one where I had on a very expensive pair of Calvin Klein jeans. They were like the rage at the time. I had a pair of velvet Calvin Klein jeans, which were super, super expensive. And I was wearing them on a day that I showed my free lunch card. And I can still remember the stink eye I got from the lunch lady who saw those pants, because everybody was wearing Calvin Kleins back then, or wanted to be able to wear Calvin Kleins if some kids couldn't afford them. And she was kind of like looking at me like, how do you have a free lunch card and have on the most expensive pair of jeans in at the same time? You could see her confusion, and what else could I see? What else did I see? Her judgment. I saw her judgment. And in that moment, I realized, oh my God, I better not wear the good pants that I got at my dad's on the weekend the day I bring my free lunch card to school, because that's going to show an incongruency. And who wants to explain that to a lunch lady? Never mind the other kids. All right, so James says that his parents divorced when he was 7, and we went from living in a $1 million home to living in a small condo, from having a lot to having much less. And for me, it was a sense of going from belonging in the community to not. Makes total sense, James. I think there are more stories like this than you would even believe. And I think the key is to realize that those kinds of experiences have a tendency to have a bunch of stories attached to them. And ultimately, it's brick by brick, James. There's a story that you probably created, and or a grandmother of yours created, about not belonging, right? There possibly were moments or experiences that you had with the community that you left. And I would love for you to start to look at what are those stories, what are those experiences. And then as you come into this new community and this condo, this small condo, and you start to see kids that are coming from a different culture, a different background, never probably lived in $1 million home before, there were stories about that too. So the key here, guys, is you have to start to do the work. You have to start to write the stories down. You can journal them down in a notebook. You can go back to the moment when you had to do that move, what it was like packing up that house for yourself, what it was like probably deciding between where you're going to take and what you couldn't take, right? Because you're moving into a much smaller space. So what actually happened, and what are the stories we told ourselves? Absolutely true. And as we learn in Landmark, right, one of the powerful parts of Landmark is that each of us are meaning-making machines, right? We can't help it. That's how humans are built. We create stories, we create meanings, but we also have these experiences, these moments that are remembered by the story we tell ourselves. So, James, here's my suggestion. Yes, I love those two distinctions, but I wouldn't ask that of yourself right now. First, I would like you to just write down the experience. Don't worry about whether it actually happened yet or it's a story you're telling yourself. First, out of the gate, just give yourself lots of spaciousness, lots of empathy, and don't do it for hours. Pick 30 minutes, 20 minutes, once a couple of times a week, where you're going to journal out what that was like for you, the transition from a wealthy lifestyle into a very different lifestyle. Just let yourself write it down. Don't worry about whether it's a story or not. Just get it on paper. Just get it out of your psyche. Get it out of your soul, out of your head, out of your heart. And as you do it, I want you to let yourself have the emotions that come up. One particular area of that story, or more than one, could bring up anger for you, could bring up grief for you, could bring up shame for you. I want you to also bake into this time you letting yourself feel that feeling. stop writing for a second and let the wave of shame be felt. Let the wave of grief be felt. Let the wave of anger be felt. Disappointment, frustration, whatever the hell shows up for you, I want you to let yourself have some room to just have that feeling, because that feeling has been living inside of you, waiting to just be felt, probably since it happened. That is certainly the case with a lot of these emotions. So good job, James. I'm excited to see you do that, and I want you to let me know how it goes. Okay. All right, guys. So how are we doing? We got one question left that I've kind of doctored up a little bit because I figure most of you guys are traders. Here it is. I suppose I might be a bit of a handful around my trading because. I suppose I might be a bit of a handful around my trading because. Now I want you to fill in the blank. Let's see what you guys say. You are so welcome, James. You're so welcome, BTO. Everybody who's here, who's writing these questions down, who's answering these questions, you guys are doing good work, and I'm proud of you, because look, how many people don't want to do this work, which really, who can blame them? This stuff is not easy, guys. Like, there's a reason people don't do work on themselves. There's a reason people take, is it the blue pill or the red pill? I can't remember. Which is the pill that puts you back to sleep? Neo gets offered the red pill or the blue pill, right? And one of those pills is the pill where, I think it's the red one, where he can just go right back to not even knowing anything that he has just learned, right? All right, so good for you, Tina. I'm a trembler. So I suppose it might be a bit of a handful around my trading because I'm a trembler. And then James says, because my self-worth is attached to my P&L. Good, saying that out loud, James. You know that's the case for, I would say, the majority of traders, but very few maybe even want to admit it to themselves. So again, are these stories true? Tina, are you really a trembler? Or is that just a story you've been telling yourself? Or even better yet, is that just a story your interceptor has been telling you for so long that you have forgot to even question if that is even true? Shane says, my broker can't keep up with my overtrading. That is so funny, Shane. I love it. I love it. So maybe stop overtrading so he can catch up, Shane. That is so funny. Oh my God, you're making me laugh. Tilly Trader says, I suppose I may be a bit of a handful around my trading because I have good streaks, weeks, and then I have a big red day. I don't know if it's because I lose it when I have a loss or what the reason is. Is it some unconscious cycle I keep maintaining? Tilly Trader, these are good questions. I want you to get very curious. BTO, I'm a handful because I can't meet my expectations. Okay, BTO, could it be that maybe your expectations need to be adjusted? It's possible. It could be that your expectations are of like an Olympian level. And I would say maybe bring them back to this galaxy. What do you think? Tilly Trader, so I want you to get very curious about how you have these winning streaks and then you have a big red day. I'd be very curious to know on the red day if you are suddenly not being true to your strategy. I'm very curious if you have any sort of resistance, right, to abundance. Do you have any sort of resistance to you being in a position of lots of monetary success? Okay, so Eric, is that your answer to the inquiry? I suppose I might be a bit of a handful around trading because I have no expectations. Is that your answer? I want you to give me your answers, not answers for other people, Eric. Stay with your stuff. Don't give other people advice unless they ask you directly for it. So, is that your sentence, Eric, for yourself? Uh, is I suppose I might be a bit of a handful around trading because tell me if that's your response because you have no expectations and you won't be disappointed. Let me know so I can speak to that if that is your answer. So here's the thing, guys. I want you to take these questions and I want you to sit with what these. Okay. So that tells me that you likely have a gremlin who is telling you that you can be crushed by disappointment. And that also is a story. Sometimes our inner saboteurs, inner gremlins tell us that we won't be able to handle losing. We won't be able to handle heartbreak. We won't be able to handle blowing up when actually we could completely handle it and possibly get even better than we were before it all went down. So I want you to think about that statement too, Eric, what that story is. What is the story about trying to keep yourself from, again, feeling, right? Trying to keep yourself from being disappointed. All of us have these inner saboteurs. All of us have these stories about the way things need to look or have to look. So I hear you that you say you're good with loss, but the kind of loss we're talking about is an emotional loss. And I hear you, there's mistiming with entry, but at the end of the day, that's still a potential discomfort with not having to go the way you want. So all of this is about, guys, is eliciting more curiosity, getting very curious about all of the ways we kind of trick ourselves or talk to ourselves like, well, if I don't have any expectations, then I won't be disappointed. I want you guys to always get curious to look underneath that. Well, what might that be about? Well, it sounds like that would be something somebody would say to themselves so they don't have to feel the discomfort of being disappointed. So that means, oh, maybe it's disappointment that is the place you want to be with. What is feeling disappointment? What's so hard about that for you, right? Everybody is going to have different things that are hard, like the trembling that came up before. Like, so what that you might be somebody who trembles. Right now, there's a story that being a trembler potentially costs you. What if that's not true? There are plenty of people who are always scared and they still go forward. They still do their own thing. So that's what I want everybody here to look at. I want you to all look at these stories that you have that have come up with these statements, and I want you to put them down on paper. I want you to look at them from the standpoint of how you're living your life. And then I want you to look at from how your trading is impacted by these stories. And okay, Tom says, I suppose I might be a handful around my trading because I'm taking a relatively large position. That's a great fill in the blank, Tom. And I'm going to also have you take that statement and get very curious about it. Now, Tom, do you often take relatively large positions, or is that unusual for you? I don't know if you're going to be in a position to write me right back, but that's what I want to ask you, because it could be that if you don't take a large position often, you have a story that you will potentially be a handful when you start to take large positions. And you want to consider, what if that belief is not true? What if you are actually somebody who can completely handle taking large positions? If you don't take large positions often, it could be that, okay, so now perhaps you're moving into a phase where you are going to start taking larger positions. Now, it could feel uncomfortable. It could feel unusual, could still feel nerve-wracking, or whatever that word is for you. And It's just a transition point where perhaps you're going to move into a phase where you are going to be taking large positions all the time and eventually be in a place where you don't even blink, right? So again, guys, none of this is right or wrong. None of this is the way it is. None of this is black and white. This is about inquiry. This is about all of these statements and blanks that you guys have filled in. I want you to just get very curious about where they come from. How long have you had them? Did you remember yourself before you had them? Was there a time when that statement or something in the neighborhood of that statement was the opposite? Was there a moment where something shifted for you, where you said, wait a minute, I no longer want to deal with disappointment. I no longer can, potentially be with mistakes that I make and not have consequences, because that one time I made a mistake just got me so scared to ever make a mistake again. All of these statements or fill in the blanks. It's like ad libs today, right? Remember ad libs? That was such a fun game. I loved it when I was a kid. I want you guys to think of all of the things that have come up for you guys. First of all, for your life, and then second, with regards to your trading. All of these are beliefs, statements, thoughts, and meaning making that has occurred to protect yourself, most likely to try to keep yourself safe, for you to potentially navigate different challenges you've had. So just as I was advocating to James, write these stories down, guys. Get them all down on paper. Start to look at them with a place of curiosity, a place of neutrality. I want you to be like, look at all of these stories that I have. Look at all these beliefs that I have. Who knew? Who knew I was such a prolific meaning-making machine? Well, you all are, because you're all human. I am a meaning-making machine myself. The only thing that's changed for me is that now I can usually spot that I am making meaning about something. The other term my friend taught me is getting a degree from MSU University. MSU is making shit up. So each of us all probably have doctorates from MSU University. I want you guys to get very curious about all of those things that you have made up, not with judgment, but to just acclimate to how all of these different stories and or meanings are informing you, are potentially not the truth, right? Because we have stories and then there is the truth, right? We have stories and we have the MSU going full throttle, and then there is what's the reality. And sometimes they are miles apart. So I'm going to pause there. I think I'm going to shut it down. Any last minute questions, any clarity about kind of the homework before I close this up, just put it in the chat box. Let me know how you guys are doing right now. If there were any coaching questions you guys had at all besides this little exercise, please put it down now before we close up. I close up. It's hot today. It's been so cold. It was so cold in my house this morning. It was like 58 degrees because it's just been a cool winter. It's nice to have you here, NBA One Day. I like your name, NBA One Day. Welcome. It's good to have you here. NBA, I was just going to start shutting it down, so I'm glad you're here. I'm sorry you just joined. Hey, NBA One Day, if you have a question or anything that you want me to address before I go, please just throw it in the chat box. You guys are so welcome. Thanks for playing along with these questions. I stumbled upon them earlier today. I really like them, and I thought this would give lots of food for thought for all of you. So NBA One Day, I was about to shut her down. So if you do have a question, I just want to make sure to answer it before I go. So just please put that in the chat box if you can. And if not, MBA, come back next Wednesday. I do these almost every Wednesday, about 8 p.m. Eastern, give or take. A couple of things, guys. I have my acceleration group coaching for traders starting on the 29th. I would love for you guys, if you haven't participated in this, to come and join us. It'll be 6 weeks. I'm going to put that in the box here so you guys can go and check it out. It's always a small group of traders who are usually very happy with the results. I think you guys will like it. This will be my third one, and it's been just a joy to do the work with the traders who have come into these conversations. And I would love for you guys to think about it and see if you think it would serve you. Tina, I'm glad it was interesting for you. Good to hear. Good to hear. And also, guys, I have a podcast dropping soon with my good friend Dave Shoemaker, who is a tattoo artist with Ninth Wave Tattoo Shop. He's based in Asbury Park, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. And it is a very personal conversation because I'm going to be sharing in that podcast my journeying through some anger that I had to discharge. And Dave was the person who assisted, he kind of facilitated this space. And I wanted to share the story with you guys. And because Dave was with me for that experience, I thought he would be the perfect person to have. But I do a lot more talking in that podcast than usual. All right, so MBA, one day you are saying, what should I do if I lose interest in something I've been very passionate about for a lot of years, but don't want to give it up because of how much hard work I put into developing the skill? NBA, that's such an excellent question. I'm really glad you put that here. Here's the thing about losing interest. If you start to listen to some of what I say, you're going to often hear me talk about the importance of understanding what your needs are. Now, the thing about needs is that they are different from wants, right? So the thing about understanding our needs is that as we develop, as we age, our needs change. Our needs morph and move into different directions. So, NBA, this is the thing. It's possible that that thing you are very interested in isn't now meeting the needs that you have. I don't know what that is, but I'm just going to guess at some of the needs that may not be met if you had needs met previously with this focus. It could be that your need for challenge isn't being met because it's possible you've mastered some of the things that initially you weren't a master of. It could be that your need for adventure isn't being met because you're feeling somewhat bored because you already know the different ways this thing could go because you've gotten to mastery, right? It could be that your need for creativity isn't being met because you don't want to be as creative anymore. These are just guesses off of my head of what could possibly be in the way. So here's the thing. If you choose to still partake in that item, you still have needs that aren't going to get met by it anymore. So what I would recommend is that you become a really good steward of getting those needs met elsewhere. You want to say, oh, wow, if I'm correct that adventure and, adventure and creativity and challenge aren't things that are getting met in that, where else might you be able to get that met? Maybe it's that you take on, a foreign language, or if you are a chess player, if you're not a chess player, you learn how to play chess. Like, find a place someplace else that would potentially get your need for adventure, creativity, contribution, challenge met, so that those needs at least do get itched. Like, right, we each have a itch and we want to scratch it. When we have needs that are not met, in one particular area, it's very tempting to stop doing that thing. But I think, like you're speaking to here, you've put a lot of hard work into it. It's just managing your expectations that now some of the needs that used to satisfy for you aren't going to satisfy you anymore. And it's possible. And this happens with people too, by the way. And this happens with relationships too, guys, over time, right? It could be at the beginning of a relationship. You get that person meets a lot of your needs, but 10 years, 20 years down the road, it could be that you have totally different needs. And now that person actually doesn't meet them anymore. And that is when a lot of times relationships end, because a person is like, wait a minute, I don't even have those needs anymore. But it could be, again, that those needs just have to get met with other people, other activities. It isn't necessarily that that person has to be, thrown out on occasion. Maybe that is best, but it could be that you have changed, your needs have changed. Our needs change all the time. They can change in the middle of an hour, for crying out loud, never mind over weeks and months and days. So the key is get in tune to your needs. And I don't know, MBA, if you have the needs list, let me grab that here for you so you can take a look. And I would say print this up for yourself and find, if you can, all the needs that activity or thing you were very passionate about, what needs it used to meet, what needs it doesn't meet anymore. And then if you can, see if you can come up with a couple of ways you can get those needs that are not getting met anymore met someplace else. Okay, hopefully that helps. BTO asked, how can you join the Twitter space? So the Twitter space is going to be tomorrow at, what time is it? I think it's 1:55 p.m. Eastern, guys. Go to my Twitter handle, Kim Ann Curtin, and I have an X space tomorrow with Stephen Goldstein. He is the author of a book called Mastering the Mental Game of Trading. He is also a trading coach, and he is going to be on an X. I'm doing a podcast interview with him tomorrow, and then we're going to come over to X and take your questions. One of my clients told me about this book. He really liked it. I'm halfway through. It's a great book. So I think you guys want to come to the X space tomorrow, 1:55 p.m. Eastern. MBA, you are welcome so much. I hope that helps. There is the link for the needs list. If nobody else knows what that is, print it up yourself, because I want you guys to always be looking through the lens of what are your needs. But I'm glad it helped. All right. Oh, is that it? Any other questions? Hopefully everything is tied up with a bow. Thank you for everybody who participated. Thank you for putting your statements in the chat box today, because I can't do this without you guys. I'm so proud of all of you for how honest you guys always are in this space with each other. I just admiring of all of you for doing the work on yourselves every week. This takes guts. It takes courage. I hope you guys will think about that acceleration course. If it would serve you and your trading, come and join us. And other than that, I am going to say hui ho. It was really good to be here with all of you guys today. And hopefully I'll see you next Wednesday at about the same time. Aloha for now.